still works as any part of 5 years. But remember, we're filing this form for the 2012 tax year. All right? So, yeah, you're filing in 2013 for 2012. So don't get confused with that. As far as we're concerned, 2013 right now doesn't apply. You'll worry about 2013 next year. Okay, right now, we're only worried about the 5 years before 2012. All right, so that's how it works. Yeah.
For a J2, would they fill out the J1 information? Do they fill out the full information of the J1, or do they leave it blank?
Well, J2 is a derivative visa.
So they leave it blank?
No, they would still fill this out.
And they list their J1 school information?
Well, if the J2 is not going to school, right?
Right.
So, no, they wouldn't fill that part out, but they're not the ones going to school.
Same thing for an F2?
Correct. Okay. But they would still be required to file the Form 8843. It's just in this case, they're neither a teacher or a trainee nor a student.
Leave it blank.
Right. Okay, so moving on. So 12 is a yes or no. If it's a yes, you're generally considered a resident for tax purposes, and whatever benefits you had as a non-resident are now lost. You know, there are cases where you can still exceed the 5 years and be considered non-resident, but it takes more work. All right, it's not a given. Okay, 13. 13 is a question that's a yes or no. And what they're asking for in 13 is, have you taken any steps to apply to be a permanent U.S. resident? Yes or no? If it's a yes, then they want you, right below it, to state what it is that you've done. So that would probably be in your situation.
The question is, well, any steps means you count basically from the day when you actually send the application?
Yeah, that's considered a step.
Yes, but 2013. Yeah. Now it doesn't count.
Right. So if you applied in 2013, you're right. It doesn't count, but it will next year. Good question. Okay, so part 3, that's it. That's all there is to part 3. You flip it over. Unless you're a professional athlete, you leave that alone. And unless you have a medical condition, you leave part 5 alone. So the last part of this form is to sign it, which is at the very bottom. Now this form, you only sign if you're filing it by itself. If you're filing it with the tax return, this would be for you who works, you would not sign this form, you would sign the tax return instead, because this form is going with the tax return. But if you're signing this form by itself, because you're only filing this form, you do sign it. And then the last part, once you sign it and make a copy for yourself, because you never want to not make a copy of any forms you send to IRS, the next step is, when do I have to file it? If you're filing this form with a tax return, the due date is April 15th, 2013.
April 15th?
April 15th. And if you're filing this form by itself, the due date is June 15th. So I would highly recommend you get it in sooner, because you may forget. So let's just pretend the due date is April 15th for this form 2, so that you don't forget about it.
For question 13,
yes.
Diversity lottery applicants apply to that one?
I don't know enough about that to know whether that is considered a step or not.
It could be.
It's possible, but I don't know that for purposes of this, that counts, because it's a lottery.
Because then you might not get it. So
right.
When in doubt, should they include it?
I would say no, because there's no guarantee you're going to get it.
Okay.
It's only when you know that you, like in his case, he knows he applied.
He knows he applied. Does it
Yeah, but you took the first step.
Well,
The
once
diversity lottery, they do too.
I feel like when the case is in there,
Right, it's in process. The lottery is just that. You know, you can win or you cannot win the lottery.
yeah,
So I wish I won that big one the other day.
I typically started gathering, documentation for that earlier, but
Right, the actual application is a proactive step. I would say for a lottery,
Okay.
no, because there's no guarantee you're going to get it. There's no difference in buying a lottery ticket.
There's no guarantee you get the.
That's true, but at least you put in an application, which is different. And it won't hit the Texas exempt status immediately anyway. But it's just a question they want for information. Okay, so due date, April 15th or June 15th. So I prefer that you just do it by April 15th so that way you won't forget it. Where do you send it? Important that you know this. All forms for international students go to the Austin Service Center. If you sent it to Kansas City, it went to the wrong place. And that is on page 3 of the instructions. In the middle of the page, you'll see the address. So you send this form to the Austin Service Center. There's no other IRS service center that will take these forms. They all go to Austin.
Do you recommend express mail or?
No, you can send it regular mail. What I do recommend is that before you mail it, you make a copy for yourself. But no, there's no requirement to use express mail. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do certified mail. You just use regular mail. Make a copy for yourself. And that's all there is to this form. It's not that hard once you understand why it's needed. All right, so to recap, this form is for you to tell IRS that A, I'm an international student, B, I fall under the exempt category for purposes of not applying that 180-day rule, which allows you to whatever treaty benefits that your home country has with the U.S. to take advantage of. Or B, in the alternative, if you do work, it allows your employer not to withhold Social Security tax or Medicare tax. Okay, so that's the purpose of filing this form. So you can tell IRS, I'm an exempt student and I want to take advantage of whatever benefits are available to me. All right, so this form is done. For those of you who didn't work, you're free to go unless you want to hang around. The next part of this class, Hector's going to go over the 1040 NREZ, which is required for those of you who did work last year. When I say work, I mean a job where they actually paid you. Okay, not a job that was unpaid. If it was unpaid, it's not, there's no income there. Okay?
What about their bank interest?
Okay, good question. Bank interest, the rule is, going back to the benefits I described earlier, as long as you're considered non-resident, and the bank interest is solely from a deposit account, not an investment account, but a deposit account, that interest is not taxed. So these days, banks don't pay any interest anyway. So there's probably nothing to tax. So, good question. So for non-residents,
Right, isn't it?
and you have simple interest clearing accounts, that income is not taxed. If you're a resident, it is taxed, however little it may be. Okay, so Hector is going to do the 1040 NREZ, and time permitting, we're going to quickly go over the state one. So with that, I'll turn it over to Hector.
Can I add really quick? If you did not work, do you still have to fill out the state income tax form?
If you did not work, no.
Okay.
You only have to do a tax return if you actually work.
I have a quick question, sorry.
Yes.
So does the signature have to be same as the passport?
Signature in a tax form?
Yeah. Or doesn't matter?
Well, when you say the same, what do you mean? Are you going to use
I
a
signed
different
my
name?
passport in my Japanese, so nobody can read it.
Okay.
So no one.
Well, whatever signature you
Okay,
use
whatever.
here.
Okay. Thank you.
As long as it's not gibberish.
And we suggest signing in pen.
Right. Good point. Never sign in pencil.
And if you can do the form in pen, also that would help, because pen does smear, or pencil does smear in any race. Like, sir, just say, my name is Hector Santos. If you want to get up and stretch, that's fine. We're going to be covering the tax form 1040 NREZ, and there's certain forms that you're going to need. So we'll cover that up front, and then you can put everything else away. So if you worked last year, 2012, you would have, okay, we're going to look at Form 1040 NREZ, and there's also a handout at the top that says, please bring the following documents to the IRS seminar. And to the students that are listening off-site, try to go slow when we get to that part, and identify the parts of the forms that you're going to need.
I have a question. Work here, right? In the U.S.
Sure.
I just realized, okay, from January 2012 to March, I was working at one place, and then I was on my J1 doing my registration. So then I left home for application and everything, and then we can highlight the income. And I've been working there at one time, and that's my job. But it says, I mean, I still have the same social security number, but it says like wage is only from February. So the money that I make from January to March, kind of, but I don't know how much I make. Because we're here, we're trying to the money that I made only in general college, but the money from March, because that's very good. Sorry to contact HR.
Some of you may have worked in two different places, either for two different schools or at one school. Maybe you worked for the school and worked for another organization or company. Each place that you work should have sent you a Form W-2, and sometimes the school will send you a Form 1042-S. Okay, so take out those forms and we're going to add those up. Question?
Yes, actually that's my question. I have a horrible situation. The first place that I used to work for, they didn't even like make a payroll or anything for me.
That's correct.
And I called them and I told them like, hey, where's my stuff? And they were like, oh, like we didn't make any payroll for anyone. So I don't know if they're gonna file something, but I'm gonna file something.
Okay, so they just paid you cash or check?
Check.
Okay,
But
so that's another situation where you might have gotten.
Just a point, because we have a lot of people that are online. If you're going to have discussions, can you go just out in the hallway? Is that okay? They just can't hear. I'm sorry. They can't hear the question. But if you have questions, by all means, stay here. But it's just they're having a hard time hearing if there's other talk going on. Thank you.
Thank you. These are all good questions because you're bringing up different situations. Some of you may have a Form W-2. Others may have a Form 1042-S. Or you may have both. Or in another case, you may have been paid in cash or by check, but they didn't send you a Form W-2 or a 1042-S, or sometimes a 1099, which is issued to contractors when they're paid in cash. So if we're paid in cash or checks, what we need is an estimate of what you got paid. If it was, for example, the same amount each week, just multiply that by the number of weeks that you work, and then we're going to use that on the Form 40 an hour each week.
It doesn't matter if they don't have not even my W-9, my social